It's movie time with John DeSando and his friends online. So everything is gonna be just fine. From the top down to the bottom. He's gonna let you know if you should stay home or if you should go. Might even yell if it's a spectacle. From San
It's
Francisco.
Movie Time is produced by John DeSando. Listen to shows and read reviews online at WCBE.org.
I'm John DeSando,
And I'm Mary Yerina.
and this is This Movie Time. All right, a documentary called Canary. Mary, we're not into ornithology here.
We
This
are
is not our, no, this is not our thing. But tell me, what is this canary?
Well, the Canary is really the tropical mountain glaciers that up until the 1970s had never really been studied. And Ohio State's Dr. Lonnie Thompson believed that that was an area that needed to be looked at. And this is the story of his life, the challenges that he's faced as a researcher, but also where that has taken him and the knowledge that it's enabled us to gain about how these mountain glaciers in the tropics are the canary in the coal mine with regards to climate change.
Yeah, this is one of the most straightforward, honest documentaries you will ever see. I'm always very suspicious about people like Michael Moore who are bringing their big message, their own liberal, for instance, point of view to the screen, and you can tell they're just manipulating. And what I really enjoyed about this documentary was its authenticity.
Well, and I thought that was very reflective of Dr. Lonnie Thompson, who is co-director of the Bird Polar Research Center at The Ohio State University with his equally brilliant wife, Dr. Ellen Mosley Thompson. And in full disclosure, I am personal friends with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I was aware of this documentary being made from the beginning.
Right.
One, I was really pleased to finally see it after hearing about it. But knowing them and then seeing how his story, because it mostly focuses on him, is told, I think is very reflective in your description of who they are as people.
Oh, yes, and I couldn't agree more about one of the things that I thought was really superior about this was that the documentary itself parallels Lonnie's his own personality, which is pretty even keel, focused, straightforward, and even so impressively at one point he says he's not sure he actually hasn't made a difference. When here is a man of heroic stature who, with an auditorium filled with people who are very interested in this subject, which was, climate change. I mean, he's a climatologist, and yet he is saying to you, I'm not sure that I have made a difference. What a wonderful revelation, isn't it?
It is, and very, very humble. And I would counter that. And they didn't really focus on his role as a professor, but the number of people he has reached in terms of their education and inspiring them to enter this field of glaciology and/or climate change, the sciences in general. That's part of his legacy as well, not just the ice cores that he has drilled and keeps in storage at The Ohio State University for researchers around the world to request samples from and be able to look at what the history that's in these glaciers is able to tell us, and really what he's doing in terms of his collection of these ice cores is these ice cores are disappearing, and these may be the only records we will ever have of them going forward. And what they can tell us about past events can inform future events.
Yeah, and I think over 20 years ago I became just really aware of this with Al Gore. And I remember the image, and Lonnie has several of these images, the image of the receding glacier. You take over a certain number of years and you can see it receding, right? And so I think I became aware of it, but this documentary, Canary, puts me right there with Lonnie, it makes me cringe when I see people carrying freezers up on their back, up a mountain. this is, and largely because you and I really avoid hero films, right? I mean, we just are not people who will try to review even the newest Marvel film. It's just like raising your eyebrows and saying, like, but here we have actually a hero, major proportions. Yeah, and so that's why I was so delighted to be here. In fact, he's called, right? He's called the nearest thing we have to Indiana Jones?
Yes, that's one of the quotes from, I think, Nature magazine, is that he's a real life Indiana Jones, and he has experienced, and they reference in one scene, there were native people at one of the tropical glaciers he and his team were working on, who felt that by working on that glacier, their culture was that's where the memories of their ancestors and the earth are, and that by working up there and taking ice from there, that he and his team were going to steal their memories and the memories of their ancestors, and he had to work through those cultural and there were some threatening opportunities. We hear of sharpshooters
Yes.
in a somewhat of a war-torn, contested area. So he really does find himself, based on his work, in really unique circumstances, and has been able to get through them, much like Indiana Jones. So he's so humble, he would never want to be referred to in that way, but for lay people like us who don't do what he does.
Cinematically it works. And
yes.
It gets people there. But as you were describing that, I remember when he was with the tribe and saying, how is he going to get out of this? That's pretty powerful. They're saying, you're taking our culture, you're stealing it, and metaphorically, yeah, it works. It works in every way. But Lonnie comes back with if we don't do this, there'll be no memory.
Right.
And I thought, what an excellent response.
This will be the last bit of the glacier that's left, is the core that he takes.
I got hooray. That's my kind of hero. He's going to go nose to nose with them, and he's going to tell them the way it is. He says to them, when they say you're stealing our culture, he says, yes, we are. He didn't fudge it. He just straightforward tells them, yeah, that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
And if we don't,
we're going to preserve it.
Right. And if we don't do it, that was
gone.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, and he does it without a fedora, without a whip, and without a gun.
Yeah.
So
it does have like a pork pie hat or something that he.
Well, yeah, I mean, sun protection and all that. But the other thing that was interesting is one of the people who knows them well is she referred to Lonnie as being described as Clark Kent. If you were to meet him at a party, he's so humble and unassuming, you would not realize the magnitude of the impact that he's having on our knowledge of the world. And so I thought that was probably a more appropriate description that's a little more humble, which is where I would classify both Thompsons in their work.
And humble perhaps is a good word for me to describe what I think overall the film. It's a humble look at an earth-changing expedition for life, for Lonnie. And it is just as you said, and that's what I loved from the beginning. I loved the fact that I wasn't getting manipulated. The music, for instance, there's no music that you really feel moving you around. I think they have some in the background, because this movie is about heroism, and it's about Lonnie and Ellen. But he is one of those interesting hero types who is so humble, like Clark Kent, that you can't help but just kind of be looking and saying, yeah.
Well, they did. I felt the filmmakers, Danny O'Malley and Alex Rivest, their goal was to make a series of these documentaries about scientist heroes, and hopefully inspire the next generation of scientists who will continue to carry this work forward and hopefully make the world a better place. And they chose Lonnie Thompson, which I think was a great choice to be their first documentary, and they follow his story, really from his humble beginnings in Gasaway, West Virginia, through his expedition in Peru up Calcaya, which was the first tropical glacier that they visited, and how they ended up being able to figure out how to get the equipment they needed up there from the very beginning, and how things have evolved over time is truly portrayed. And I also felt they did a wonderful job because Lonnie has not been without challenges.
And we are going to talk about those in Back Talk, Mary.
Which is
you
great.
You are so good. You are so
but,
good. You're looking ahead.
But they're very good at humanizing him. And even though I know them, I was moved to tears a couple times by their story and the challenges that they have faced. And it has a very strong message at the end about climate change and what these glaciers, as the Canary and the coal mine, are telling us about where the world is headed, and we're at a tipping point, and we have choices to make, and that's one of the reasons that they agreed to be in this documentary, particularly Lonnie, and telling his story, is they want that message of true science and fact away from politicizing the issue to get out.
Well, let's talk about that on Back Talk. I'd like to look at some of the film's weaknesses at that time, and generally speaking to some of the ironies of that film, which are very fine because it's not supposed to be some literary expose, but it turns out to be very literate in its own way. So, Mary Yerina, the documentary is as Canary. It is playing currently at Gateway Film Center, and it's playing around the country, even the Smithsonian.
It is getting wide theatrical release in AMC and Regal Cinemas, and Smithsonian is doing a special screening in New York this week as well. It's a documentary that is, I think, a standard documentary in terms of style and approach, but Dr. Thompson's story is so compelling, and the visuals of being on the glaciers with him are so stunning. I would recommend seeing this.
Movie time with John DeSando and his friends online. So everything is gonna be just fine. From the top down to the bottom. He's gonna let you know if you should stay home or if you should go. Might even yell if it's a